Thanks for watching. My name is Sean Wright, independent journalist, reporting for InfoWars. I am reporting from Minneapolis, Minnesota, also known as the Midwest Civil Unrest. Today we're talking about the stories of loss of liberty and what that means to us. They're passing laws that violate our Fourth Amendment rights and every other amendment we have. So they're capitalizing on the limiting of free speech, saying who can say what and where they can say what. I'm sitting here with filmmakers David Crowley and Danny Mason working on the project Gray State. So can you guys please tell me, what is the Gray State?
Thank you, Sean. Good to be on your show. The Gray State essentially is, like you said, what happens after the police state. So we all recognize these trends that happen day to day, the loss of liberty that we kind of just gloss over because there's something better on TV. So if no one steps in to prevent these things, I mean, bringing the issues to the light, like what Ron Paul's campaign is doing, or what these other patriots like Alex Jones are doing, is they're bringing to light these very real issues that if they go unchecked, they create what we're kind of terming as the gray state. So if the people do not exercise their rights at this time, the rights are taken away. Soon this gray state will exist, and they'll be powerless to stop it, except through revolution, which is of course something we don't really want. We want a revolution of the mind, not of the musket.
So is this film tuned in more for the truther audience that already understands pretty much what's going on and the global elites taking power from individual thoughts and freedoms, or is this something that anybody on any research level can understand?
Well, if I can answer that one. What we have is a film is a piece of art. What it is not is propaganda. So what I'm not going to do is make a movie about the truth movement. However, art imitates life, as they say. So the truthers will certainly find grounds to follow this film, and they'll definitely attach to its concepts.
And I think going off what David said, going into the project, we both talked about it being a character-driven piece, and that all the different variations would be represented through the characters and stuff. So
it is feature film.
Yeah.
You know, it's not propaganda. It's not about what is going on in the world. Those things are in the movie as the background context, essentially. But the A story is essentially, it's a human story, because that is the film you want to see.
People might be questioning that this could actually be a reality, that more, in the mainstream eye, they might not see this as something they can actually conceptually grasp. So is there going to be some sort of educational period within this movie? Is there, can I get some more of the concepts here, what you're working on?
Like I said, Gray State is about showing the consequences, and they are essentially real consequences. So if people can read into what they're seeing and say, hey, wait, I recognize that in real life. I'm going to go ahead and do my own research and look into it. That is just an added benefit. That is not our intent. If they do that, great, because we do believe in things that Gray State is about. And what we're not going to do is try to convince people, because that's, like I said, propaganda.
it's not our job, and we don't want to hit the audience or the viewers over the head with it, because then it's just too much and they'll just be closed off to it. But if we can represent it through symbolism and character arcs, then we've done our job. Like we said, we both subscribe to a lot of the main themes into it.
We're artists, not politicians.
Yeah. And just for us, this is doing our job, like everybody else should be doing their job.
Well, thank you, David and Danny, for showing up and spending your time here to help educate people about this project. But what I ask, is this a reality? Is what they're saying really true? Could this really happen? Even right in my own city where I live, we came across and we've seen police doing raids and practice drills, clearing of homes, clearing of business centers. Why do our law enforcement need to be practicing militarized drills? They don't need to be going in for protecting us from these terrorists. We're just citizens within our own country. We don't need to have these guys preparing for war. If they are preparing for war, I feel that we should be at least in the know. Where do we go from here? Let's see what the people think. So we both agree that we're losing our liberties. So why is it such a big deal?
Well, it's a big deal because I think every man has a claim to his own rights, his own liberty. He should be able to pursue happiness. He should have a right to his own life. He should be free from being harmed by another individual. I think these are basic founding principles of this country. I mean, it's not like we've lost everything here, but we are kind of going down a road to serfdom, and it's pretty obvious this is occurring.
What about the First Amendment right? How is that being violated?
First Amendment is being violated right and left. It's pretty obvious what's happening in the press and what's happening to freedom of speech. I was myself thrown out of speech by Hillary Clinton.
So this is America.
The government
This is America. Who are you?
To communicate with each other.
I was beaten up, cuffed with steel cuffs, and thrown into jail, and accused of disorderly conduct. Can you imagine that? I hadn't said a word.
I saw that.
So, so these things that we used to treasure, that we used to consider to be really sacrosanct, have gone by the board.
It's a big deal. Why do people care?
Well, that's the problem is and that's what we're here to do, is to educate people about, you know what, you are losing your liberty. Debt and dependency is not the road to liberty and freedom and what created this country. And we have to stand up for those rights. I don't want my children to grow up in a situation where they don't have those liberties or have become numb to what liberty is.
I mean, there's a history of this. In fact, all of mankind, people haven't had the right to freedom of speech. That's actually a relatively new idea when you look at the history of the world.
Do you agree that we're looking forward to an upcoming gray state?
That's an interesting question. I could definitely agree with you and say that we are definitely looking at a transformation of our society, and it's not necessarily a good thing. We've seen an enormous amount of bills that are passed and continuously are trying to be passed that are going to infringe on our constitutional rights. And I mean, that's exactly what leads to a militarized state. So yeah, if a gray state is a militarized state, if that's a fascist state, if that's a state that doesn't tolerate dissent, I could definitely see that happening.
Would you agree that if we don't take provisions we need to stop this rise, that we will end up in the gray state?
Yeah, the Patriot Act goes right in along with that, and once again we see that it doesn't matter Republican or Democrat. What we're taking the war on terror, and instead of fighting terrorism, we're now turning those laws back onto the American people.
One of the charges they had against the King of England was the fact that he did that exact same thing. We just go ahead and throw that all willy-nilly into legislation.
Can I ask you why you voted for the Patriot Act to reinstate it?
Well, we didn't reauthorize the Patriot Act. We had just a couple of provisions that were temporarily reauthorized.
So you wouldn't have voted for either of the bills, the Patriot Act?
Not in their form, not in that form, no. No, the National Defense Authorization Act is how we fund our military. So obviously you need a certain part of that, but the plain fact that we're rolling all of that into these huge omnibus bills now and then passing them, that's not good government.
You know, the government pretty much has the power to assassinate anybody that they feel is a threat.
Yeah.
Well, what if you're a threat? What if I'm a threat?
I think that's a good point. I mean, right now, we're more than likely not going to see that. I mean, if you're affiliated with Al-Qaeda, and yes, and these guys probably are bad dudes, and that's how it's used right now. But if you study history and you know that you allow this kind of abuse of power by the federal government to take place, you undermine the rule of law, I fear what happens to us down the road, and I think that's what we're in right now.
If we were able to push them enough and say, you know what, we're here, we're not going anywhere, we're in every spot where you depend on people to do the services for you, and we are tired of your elite control, do you think if we were to let them know that we are going to make their lives so uncomfortable unless they back off and let us be free citizens, that we have a chance to maybe have a democratic country again?
Oh, sure. Well, that's the principles of representative democracy, of course. Each group and each district should be A, informed, B, decisive, and C, active. And so that's just really up to us. And if we don't do that, then we suffer the consequences.
Do we want our democracy to die? Do we not care about democracy anymore? We'll be right back to square one. And all the work of your founding fathers will have been carelessly set at naught by the very people to whom you have entrusted the defense of that Constitution.
Does that affect you? Do you see what's happening? If it doesn't affect you, just remember one thing. When the gray state comes, you will be directly affected. It is our federal government's duty to protect our country from any domestic and foreign threats. But what happens when our military is the domestic threat? We all know what we need to do. We can either choose to stick our head in the sand, or we can choose to stand on our feet. But if we choose to stick our head in the sand, we know what we deserve. I'm Sean Wright, doing my part to win the InfoWars.